Welcome. My name is William Messakar. I am a master model railroader in the 4th Division of the Pacific Northwest region of the National Model Railroad Association. I want to welcome all of you to the virtual layout tour we'll have presented today by members of the NMRA. We would encourage you to find out about the NMRA and join in order to participate in these virtual tours. We have other virtual clinics and other activities for the National Model Railroad Association that we think you'll find a big help to your modeling, and you'll get to meet model railroaders just like you. So welcome to our tour, and I hope you enjoy it.
Our first tour is Russ Segner, and he is the superintendent of the 4th Division, and he has a beautiful Sn3 layout in Issaquah, which is a suburb of Seattle, and he's going to give us a PowerPoint show. Go ahead, Russ.
Good morning. Thank you, Burr. Actually, I'm in Newcastle, which is a suburb of Issaquah.
Oh, yeah, I knew that.
Just kidding. I'm going to talk about my layout from the perspective of points of interest and use it as a way of describing the layout, and have opportunity during the presentation to talk about some of the things that I did while I was constructing it and why I did them the way I did. So here we go. I started my layout in 2001 when we moved here to Newcastle. And so I've shown on the first slide here the old layout I had in Bellevue, which was going to be Denver Rio Grande Tennessee Pass. And I show you this because this is the piece of bench work that survived the move. The other picture here is the train room that I got here at the new house. It's a bonus room above a 3-car garage. And this is the way I found it. And I thought, what a great space, but they've loused it up with this furniture. We talked them into taking that out when they sold the house. One of the challenges of this layout room, of course, are the sloping ceilings. As you can see here, they're at a 45-degree slope, and the edge of this is right at 48 inches off the floor. So I had to design the layout to deal with that as a problem. So my layout basically is logging, 1930s. The locale is Northwest Washington. It's narrow gauge, Sn3. And my theory is that the Denver Rio Grande built all the way across Idaho and into Oregon and up into Washington, came across White Pass and reached the little town of Morton near Mount Rainier. So my line, the Coal Creek Lumber Company, connects to Morton, and that's how I get to the outside world. The equipment that I run on the layout is almost all geared locomotives from Westside Lumber Company and a couple of other logging layouts. I do have some rod engines, and those run the Denver Rio Grande trains in from Morton into Coal Creek. And those locomotives are serviced and turned, and they take a train out at the end of any operating session. So Coal Creek Lumber Company was built at Coal Creek to support nearby mines with timbers for the mine operation. And they also cut large timbers that are shipped out of the area. They're basically not cutting any finished lumber per se. So all of it is going to be 8x8s and 4x12s, 4x16s, and 12x12s. And so that's the type of material I deal with on my layout. I wanted to set it up so that each of the scenes were separate, either by a view block or just by the way they were organized in the room. So most of them are in the corners of the room, and one of them is at a window seat, a bay window. In each of the scenes, there are at least a dominant structure and then a number of supporting structures. So that's sort of the basic idea. When I built it, I had not operation in mind per se, but I wanted to have some sort of logic with the region that we're in here in the Northwest. So all of the timber, the trees and scenery is pretty much a Northwest environment. So here's the layout that I put in this room. And this is the doorway where that picture of the room was shot across here. There's a stairway over here that goes down to the lower level that goes down into the family room down below. Here's this bay window that I described. This is roughly 7 feet across and 3.5, 4 feet deep. This is 19 feet across and 16 feet this direction. So I have 8 scenes I want to describe today. And this is what you'll see when you come into the layout. Up the stairs, the first thing you see is going to be scene number 1, Elebree Mines. It's at the top of the stairs, and it's the first thing you see. I wanted to have something that was reasonably dramatic. And I can show you over time, the first thing I had there wasn't very dramatic, so I changed it. Elebree Mines is reached by a switchback from the bunker's yard, which we'll see a little later. The tram that you'll see delivers ore from the mines that are located away from the bunkers. And then all of the mines, waste piles and so on don't have to be modeled. So this is the bunker at the top of the stairs. And here's the tram that delivers the ore from the mines into the bunker. There's 2 different bunkers here, high-grade ore here and low-grade ore here. This is a scratch-built structure from typical design of structures all through the western mining areas. There are 2 tracks up here that this will handle 4 cars at a time. The trick is that you can only get 3 cars up the switchback at a time. So here you can see the slopey walls again that I'm dealing with and so on. Coal Creek is the next area that you'd see. There's a main yard. There are engine facilities here, turntable, engine spots, which all can be electrically isolated. I can have 7 locomotives sitting there, all turned off. Otherwise, you'd have all this racket with the sound systems. At the town of Coal Creek, we have the depot, a team track, Chambers Industries, handling machine, wood rail wool, and brass and day merchandise. Brass is a nickname that the guys in the Air Gauge group gave me, and Day, of course, is Susan Day, who's the comptroller of the railroad. That's my wife. She handles the money. Ah. The details here include smaller buildings, some terrain issues and drainage, a programming track, and so on. So here's my little town of Coal Creek. Here's the depot. These are residential structures along the back street here. Most of these actually came from Paul Scholl's layout when we had to take it down following his death. There's a loading dock here and team track. And then from this direction, you see wood rail wool here. This is Chambers Industries, which is a machine fabrication company that builds logging equipment and maintains logging equipment. They also ship to offline customers. So I have 2 loading spots here at the warehouse, at the dock. There's a loading dock here, and then there's a track running up into the yard where they load a lot of the equipment. That track goes into the building. The building has got a complete interior in it with an overhead gantry crane and lights and so on. Nobody can ever really see it unless you can look inside. Next to it is handling machine. It's a machine shop that works on equipment and so on. There's a loading dock here that handles equipment going in and out of handling machine. Then this is wood rail wool, wool house, and you'll see that relates to the sheep pens up at the end of the railroad. Here's my engine facility, which includes an oil loading for the oil burning locomotives. And this is the receiving track for the oil coming in. And then this is the coal loading facility we have a couple of coal fired locomotives. And so the coal is loaded into the tenders of the locomotives by shovel, just like they did at Rico, or not at Rico, but at Dolores, Colorado. And there's my ash pit. One of the things I wanted to design was something to break up the flatness of a yard. So there's some slight elevation changes in the track here. But then I ran this little drainage through the yard, and it's full of oil and other crap from the engine house and all of that material. No salmon. Here's my turntable. It's an Armstrong table that's manually operated. That is, it's motor driven, but you have to spot it by eye. And it's pretty well done. Max McGinnis, the local model railroader, designed the mechanism for me, the electronics. Got a couple of tracks here, in addition to those over next to the engine house. And this is a departure track, or an engine for, receiving and departing track. And a water tank with 2 spouts serves both these tracks. Another shot of it. And you can see here the impact of the seating coming down at the angle to the backdrop. So what we ended up painting this a lighter blue to somewhat blend with this. And as you're looking straight on, you don't see quite as much of a shadow. But this sort of looks like an overcast, as often we have in the Northwest. Then this is the other end of the yard at Coal Creek, and it goes through a tunnel into Morton, which is my staging yard, number 3 here. Morton is my connection to the outside world. Trains are turned there on a turntable, and there's a sector plate here for operating locomotives in and out of the yard. Here's the tunnel through the wall. Took a little negotiating to get permission to cut through the wall. And then here's at the other end of the yard is a sector plate. This just rotates it off of this end, and it will serve all 4 tracks. So trains coming into Morton from Coal Creek, the locomotive can leave the train here, shift over to this back track and run around to the turntable and be ready to depart, go back out to Morton or out to Coal Creek. And here you can see a better shot of the yard. It's a home-built turntable on a Lazy Susan, which works very well. I've built it in such a way that tracks can run through the turntable to serve 2 industries back here. And I have 2 industry spots along this back track. I haven't used it in operating sessions recently because it tended to tie up the yard here big time. And it'd take an operator 2 hours to just switch the cars here. The next scene you see is the mill as we head out of Coal Creek upgrade. The mill was inspired by a book written by Hank Johnston, The Whistle Blows No More. This is a mill that existed at the Converse Basin in California, operated by the Sanger Lumber Company. I was just intrigued by this photograph of this mill with the clerestory and the roof lines the way they are and so on. It's a relatively small mill, about 48 feet wide and 113 feet long. And I measured it off of the photographs by window spacings and ended up with a pretty good set of plans that I made. This is the boiler house. The interesting thing about this, well, the other thing that intrigued me with this mill was built up on piling because this is just a depression here. There's no pond here. It's a dry landing, but I elected to make a pond. The lumber in this particular case is loaded back out on the cars and then pulled up this line up to the crest of a hill on a cableway. On my layout, I do have a log pond, so I have a log dump track here. And you can see it's the elements here are an A-frame to unload the logs. The cable comes down and passes underneath the logs and hooks onto a ring in the brow log here. And then the cable is hoisted and it just pitches the logs off into the water. This is modeled on an actual log dump in English Bay up in Skagit County. And it's another shot which shows the log dump track and the location to the mill. This is a track here that receives oil that supplies fuel to the boiler house here at the mill. Good shot of the mill itself. Logs are pulled up a ramp on a cable, not a chain, like a lot of mills are built, but this is built to from the idea from the Port Alberni mill up in Vancouver Island, where they just wrap a cable around the end of the log and drag it up on sheet iron, a ramp. This is my dispatch building. So trains leaving and coming in or get their instructions here from operations guys. This is the oil track for the oil tank that serves the boiler house. This is the green chain area where the finished cut material is loaded onto either flat cars or gondolas or into box cars. There's also loading here for smaller pieces into box cars. The log pond is formed by a dam. It's behind this set of tracks here. And you see a little crane here that will lift the boards out of the spillway to lower the level of the pond. At the end of the season, they'll drain the pond and clean it out for all the debris that accumulates over the time. I originally had 3 tracks here, but there was just too much in the way of material. This is my yard. There's dry storage here. There would be large stacks of lumber here. Mill site takes an awful lot of real estate. I've elected to model just a few elements of it. I may at some point simulate some dry storage back here in the against the backdrop and around the corner. The little red Heisler there serves that mill. The next spot along the layout is Lake Johnston. Lake Johnston has a dam on it, and there's a dock we'll see where they cut ice in the winter, and there's an ice house. Here's the ice house and the ramp coming from the dam, where there's a dock on the lake, and in the winter they cut blocks of ice and move it across and store it in the ice house. I wanted one place along the railroad where I would have it just track for scenic shots and so on. And that's this area here along Lake Johnston. And I got a couple of guys fishing and a hobo going down the track. One thing about a lumber operation is you don't have to build as many trees as you might think, because there's going to be a lot of stumps. Lake Johnston is fed by this stream that comes here under this little bridge. And here again, you can see some of the scenery designed to focus your eye on this area. And you're not so conscious of this slopey wall. It's right in front of you. Just beyond Lake Johnston is Bunkers. Bunkers is sort of the midpoint of the layout, but it was the original end of the layout when I built it in 2002 up through before 2004. Bunker has a station where the train will stop. There's a passenger train that will bring crews up in the morning, and eventually there'll be a path across here and over to the bunker here. This scene is not complete because there need to be a lot more buildings supporting this operation. Bunker originally was built with 2 yard tracks, which proved to be insufficient for the operation. So I built a 3rd one, and you'll see that bump out in some other shots. This is the switchback that goes up to serve Elebree mines. And this is a 4.5, almost a 5% grade. Here's a better shot of it. And then it runs up along here. One thing might add, someone asked me in the previous presentation about scenery. The scenery here is set off from the wall about 1.5 inches, 2 inches. You'll see that in several shots. And that gives sort of a shadow effect. And it seems to help with the idea of distance. Young man painted my backdrop, and he also painted the scenes on the wall here. The problem when you're painting scenes on a slopey ceiling is that if you make much detail here, it leaps out at you. So the shaded part is to be in the distance, but this is actually closer to your eye. At Bunkers, there's a Y, and this again was the original end of the layout, and it was just a Y here. It ended right here at the stairway, and it ended just beyond this turnout. A couple of features I've added here is a facility for a helper engine, which will help trains going up this grade, which is 4.25%. And a little water feature with sort of a swamp, which we have a few of here in the Northwest. Eventually, I added on to that by extending the track from the end of the Y into this little L-shaped addition, 6 foot by 6 foot, and built the town of Mineral. So there are several things here: Consolidated Mines, Glenoma Hardware, Stanley Oil, and Hampton Supply, and a depot. So here's that scene. This gives me 4 more spots for handling trains, handling shipments. A depot, a little freight house, Hampton Supply, Glenoma Hardware, and Stanley Oil. And those are all names actually in the town of Mineral down near Mount Rainier. And here's my Consolidated Mines. This is basically a placeholder because I haven't built the actual mine structure itself with the bunkers and so on. But it was painted in such a way that the waste piles are off the scene. This is a backdrop here that a young man painted for me. And here you can see the simulation of the waste piles off in the distance. If you want a scene to sort of stand out, get a guy to paint a good backdrop for you. Bunkers is served by 2 Heislers for switching. And in the operation of the layout in a session, we'll have 2 operators working this area. It's quite busy. The road up to Tiger Mountain goes around the stairway. You'll see a shot of that in a minute, but at Tiger Mountain is the collection point for the timber loads coming from the cutting areas. There's a car repair building here, loading dock, building to repair cats and other equipment with a loading dock, a stores building, a coal bin, and a dispatch building at the Y, and their sheep pens. And both at the beginning of the track up from the mill below and here at the top are dispatch buildings for crew instruction. Here's the track coming up along the stairway. That again, like mentioned, it's a 4.25% grade. Come up here to, my curves are all right, 28 inches. So I can handle 7 or 8 cars up the hill if only 1 or so of them is a brass car. But if I get 2 or 3 brass cars, it gets a little tough. Although I've double-headed up here with 2 Shays or a couple of Heislers. Then there's a Y up here at the top. And here's the layout, part of the layout of Tiger Mountain. Now this is an older shot than the one here on the right because I've added some structures. And then here is another shot of the area which shows the dispatch building and a warehouse. This is a commissary or a stores building for supplying the cutting areas and so on. There's a little coal house here that handles the coal for the coal stoves in the houses and other structures. Here's an equipment maintenance building, kit bash structures from Wild West models, and a little scratch-built shed for maintaining cats and other equipment. There's a workman in here at machines and so on. Here's a train prepared to leave Tiger Mountain, and it'll depart, go down the Y. Here's the sheep pens for handling sheep in the spring and up in the winter. I want to go back. We've got a little time here to talk about some of the early part of the layout when I was building it. And this is a shot of that area at the top of the stairs as I was building it. And originally, you see the layout ended here at the Y, and I had a big sofa here and a coffee table, sort of a crew lounge. This structure is designed as a freestanding module, and it'll lift off of this platform. So electrically, it's not connected to the layout, except for the track is connected electrically through the rail joiners. There's a tortoise machine here embedded in this structure that's operated by batteries, or by a battery, which works extremely well. And here, the other side of it is another tortoise that is operated by the electrical panel here because it sits on this platform. And this structure lifts off, and you won't see the tortoise machine is independent of this structure. I built it on pedestals, on a pedestal so that it would keep the openness of the whole room. I didn't want to build a structure underneath it. It worked pretty well. Then at the mill, here's some shots of the mill under construction. This is the bay window as I originally configured it. I had a photo backdrop here, which ultimately didn't work for a couple of reasons. One, there would not be a stand of trees like this close to a mill. It would all be stumps. But here's the bay window. Now, I don't know whether you can see this that well or not, but there's a tray here that slides in and out on it. It's a shelf that slides in and out on a frame here. And this entire piece of material, it's on plywood base, is roughly 4 feet by 4 feet. And this is the site where the mill building is. So I can slide this out and take it to a table to work on as I'm detailing it. But that also means that I can get back in here to work on the backdrop or any scenery or the overhead lights, which I've had to do once. Then here you can see the seam between the movable section here and the permanent structure of the layout. And after I finished all of the work on this, I covered this crack with a putty and then blended it in with paint. And you'll see that the logs eventually cover it up. This is the area at the other end of the Y at Bunkers. And this is where the layout originally terminated at Bunkers. So we decided to add on to it and above the stairway, and here you can see the stairway going downstairs. And this structure is two pieces. It's an L. This piece pins into this one. And these were built together in my garage. And I used the Bragdon 2-part epoxy or resin rocks, which works extremely well. They're very lightweight. Otherwise, this would have weighed, 600 pounds. Wouldn't have been easy to move around. And at the time, I had a window here. With the window still there, but was not covered by a backdrop. So this was just a pretty blah area of the layout. And ultimately, we got it covered by the backdrop that my friend painted for me. And here you can see where it comes around, and this is the top of cabinetry that covered the layout. That's the end of it, guys. If you've got some questions, we can sure go back.
Nope. Russ, what's your crew size and how long are your op sessions?
The op sessions are about 2 hours. And my crew size, 6 guys at the most. In an operating session, we'll have a crew at Coal Creek, a crew at Tiger Mountain, and a crew at Mineral. So one operator will start a train of logs coming down the grade, comes through Bunkers, and goes to the mill, swaps the loads in to the log dump track and empties out, takes empties back on up. In the operation of this, the locomotive would be headed back upgrade in reverse, which is fine because it's going up a 2% grade, comes to Bunkers, and instructions tell the operator to turn the locomotive here and then continue back on up on this steeper grade 4.5%. This segment takes about an hour and a half for a single or 2 operators to run. Another operator or pair of operators start at Coal Creek, and they run a merchandise train, basically, and supplies and so on. They'll maybe leave cars here at the mill. They'll maybe switch the ice house. They will come up to Bunkers, and they will leave cars or pick up cars, and then they'll continue on up to Tiger Mountain. And then that train turns, and then it has a section leg which runs at the end toward the end of the session. At Bunkers, there are usually 2 guys that are kept quite busy because they have to to switch the mines, bring loads down to bunkers, and also switch the industries here at Mineral, and consolidate them in for trains that will pass through. They also run a run from bunkers down into Coal Creek and continue on through to Morton, because they'll have loads of ore and so on, and then they'll bring empties back and do some pickups in Coal Creek and bring other material back up to bunkers and switch this area. That's at least 2 hours, and that's a very intense set of operations for 2 guys. They have 2 locomotives they can use here and so on. There's a 4th operation that's a potential if I have time and operators. There's a mill turn that starts at the mill, comes into Coal Creek with loads, and then returns with empties or other supplies to the mill. And it also switches cars amongst the trackage in the mill from finished or cut material going to dry storage and so on. So yeah, an hour's 2 to 2.5 hour session is plenty for most of the guys. So
Greg Wright had a question about layout height, which he answered, but I would ask you, how do you feel about the layout height?
You see here on the drawing, it's 44.5 inches at Coal Creek, right about a little above my waist. And then that gives me 4 inches here on the backdrop for vertical. And so that's the constraint. No tall structures in this area. You come up to the mill, it's still pretty much on the same grade. It's about 45 inches here. And then come up to bunkers, which is 48 inches. Then at Elebree Mines is 52 inches. You see on either side of this little peninsula, this is fully 6 inches or 4 inches higher than on the other side. And that big stone or rock outcropping is essentially a view block between this side and the other side. And then at the top, I'm 58 inches here at Tiger Mountain. And that works very fine for me. Now, taller guys like Burr and others, they have to lean over a little bit. But that's one of the hazards of the job, I guess. I operate with this program that Bruce Hanley built called Rail Ops, which is computer generated. It prepares a switch list, which tells me what cars go into a train and what their destination is. And then the switch list will take the train through the line up to the mill, on up to bunkers, on to Morton, or into Mineral, on up to Tiger Mountain, for instance. And it'll tell me at any one of these locations what cars I'm to pick up or set out. It's pretty straightforward. It tells me at the end of at each location what cars I should leave with, and so on. And people adapt to it very quickly. It's prints out on a sheet that they're usually for a session. There'll be 3 or 4 sheets for a given crew as they move along the layout on a clipboard, and it's pretty easily handled. I've got Velcro along the fascia of the layout all along the way, where you can stash this clipboard with the Velcro, and then I've got Velcro on the back of my NCE handheld controllers. It's already well controlled, so it's pretty easy to move around. There's plenty of room for the operators to work amongst each other. There's plenty of distance across here at Mineral, for instance. The only real bad choke point is right here. If I've got an operator at Tiger Mountain and somebody working a train at Morton, and they're trying to come through here, but most people are able to make it work without an issue.
Russ, if someone wanted to look into RR Ops, how would they find it?
It's Bruce Hanley, and I will happily share that information with anybody who wants to send me an email. And my email is easily found, but it's russeg@gmail.com. There's 3 R's. I'm sorry, 3 S's. russeg@gmail.com. There are a number of videos of the layout that I've shot, segments on YouTube, and you can find it. Just look for Coal Creek Lumber Company. One thing I would mention here at number 2 at Coal Creek, Well, this track was the track that I added. And on the layout, you'll see a bump out. Originally, I had only 3 tracks in the yard, which as you operate, you very quickly understand that your track plan wasn't perfect. And so I added a track, Coal Creek, and also added one at Bunkers.
Russ, would you say something about your recent use of servo motors for turnout control?
Sure. At the mill, right here, there's a crossover here between these 2 tracks. And there are 3 turnouts here that are controlled by servos. You can't see the panel in this photograph, but there's a small panel right here below the yard. And the servos work flawlessly. They're quiet, smooth, and slow. I mean, the rails move slow. Pretty straightforward. Now, Ted Becker, who's on, is doing an awful lot of work with servos and does a good clinic on that. His configuration uses Arduino to control the servos. But mine are just very basically Tam Valley units that come complete with the buttons and all of that. Everything else is tortoise. Well, except in my in Mineral and in Morton, they're hand throws. And again, everything is close to the front of the layout, so it's not a big issue.
And your DCC system?
It's an NCE. I started with a lens and it worked fine, but I wanted to go to radio control, and so I elected to change it out for an NCE. There's a herd mentality up here amongst our narrow gauge guys, and almost everybody's using NCE, which makes it handy because you can get guys to help you with troubleshooting issues. One other thing I would comment about the use of geared locomotives, they run very slowly. And so some guys initially have a little problem with switching because they think they're reacting too slow, but it's realistic. The benefit of them obviously is that it makes the layout much longer because it takes a little while to run a train from Morton all the way up the top of Tiger Mountain. I mean, at full, 10 miles an hour, it's going to take 15 minutes or so at least to run that distance.
Ted wants to know, does RR Ops run on Linux?
Yes, it should run on just about any platform you've got. But I'll put you in touch with Bruce, and he's prepared to deal with those issues, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you very much, Russ.
All right, guys, enjoy.
That was very interesting.
Hello again. This is another reminder that this virtual layout tour has been brought to you by members of the 4th Division of the Pacific Northwest region of the National Model Railroad Association. And we hope you've enjoyed it. And we want to encourage you to, again, find out about the NMRA online. Both PNR and NMRA have an excellent website where you can get information about joining and participating in this and other activities like our clinics that are held all over the region. So thank you for joining us today and wish you great modeling.